Will you come and start the hunting season with me at my farm in Marinville? I will be very happy if you do, my dear friend. First, I am all alone. It is not easy to reach, and the place I live in is very simple, so I can only invite my closest friends. I said yes to his invitation, and on Saturday, we took a train to Normandy. We got off at a station called Almaviere, and Baron René, pointing to a carriage pulled by a shy horse and driven by a big countryman with white hair, said, "Here is our ride, my dear friend." The driver reached out his hand to his landlord, and the Baron shook it warmly, asking, "How are you, Maître Lebrement?" "Always the same, Sir Baron." We climbed into this swinging cart, which was on two very big wheels, and the young horse, after a sudden turn, started to run fast, tossing us into the air like balls. Every time we fell back on the wooden bench, it hurt me a lot. The countryman kept saying in his calm, steady voice, "There, there. All right, Moutard, all right." But Moutard barely listened and kept jumping around like a goat. The Baron looked sadly into the distance at the large Norman countryside, which was rolling and gloomy, like a huge English park. And René Dutreuil suddenly said, "I love this land, I feel deeply connected to it." He was a true Norman, tall and strong, with a small belly, and from the old family of adventurers who went to create kingdoms on the shores of every ocean. He was about 50 years old, maybe 10 years younger than the farmer who was driving us. The farmer was a thin countryman, all skin and bones, one of those men who live a very long time. After 2 hours of traveling on rocky roads across that green and flat plain, the carriage entered one of those farmyards with many fruit trees and stopped in front of an old building falling apart, where an old maid was waiting beside a young man who took care of the horse. We went inside the farmhouse. The kitchen was big, high, and smoky. I went outside to look at the farmyard. It was very large, with many apple trees, small and twisted, full of fruit that fell on the grass around them. I went back inside the house. The Baron was warming his feet by the fire, listening to the farmer talk about life in the countryside. Then we had dinner. It was a good country meal, simple and plenty of it, long and peaceful. While we were eating, I noticed the special kind of friendly closeness between the Baron and the farmer, which had caught my attention from the start. Outside, the beech trees kept sighing in the night wind, and our two dogs, locked up in a shed, were whining and howling in a strange way. The fire was dying down in the big fireplace. The maid had gone to bed. Maître Lebrement said, "If you don't mind, Sir Baron, I'm going to bed. I'm not used to staying up late." The Baron reached out his hand to him and said, "Go ahead, my friend," in such a warm tone that I said, as soon as the man had left, "He's very loyal to you, this farmer?" "More than that, my dear friend. It's a story, an old, simple, and very sad story, that ties him to me. Here is the story. You know that my father was a colonel in the cavalry. His assistant was this young man, now an old man, the son of a farmer. When my father retired from the army, he took this former soldier, who was then about 40, as his servant. I was about 30 at that time. We were living in our old castle of Valrennes, near Cotta-Bequencox. At that time, my mother's maid was one of the prettiest girls you could see, with fair hair, slender and lively, a real old-fashioned maid that you don't see anymore. Today, these girls grow up too fast. Paris, with the help of the trains, attracts them, calls them, takes them as soon as they are becoming women, these little girls who used to stay simple maids. Well, this girl was very sweet, and I often gave her a kiss in dark corners, nothing more, I promise you. She was a good girl, and I had respect for my mother's house, which is more than I can say for the troublemakers of today. Now, it so happened that my servant, the old soldier, the farmer you just saw, fell madly in love with this girl. He was completely crazy about her. The first thing we noticed was that he started forgetting everything and not paying attention to anything. My father kept saying, "Jean, what's wrong with you? Are you sick?" He answered, "No, no, Sir Baron. Nothing's wrong with me." He grew thin, he broke glasses, and he dropped plates while serving at the table. We thought he might have some nerve problem and called the doctor. The doctor thought it might be a spine disease. Then my father, worried about his faithful servant, decided to send him to a private hospital. When the poor man heard about my father's plan, he told us the truth. "Sir Baron." "Yes, my boy? You see, I don't need medicine." "Oh? Then what do you need?" "I need to get married." My father turned around and looked at him in surprise. "What did you say?" "I want to get married." "Married? So, you're in love?" "Yes, Sir Baron, that's how it is." And my father started laughing so hard that my mother called out from the next room, "What's so funny, Gontran?" He answered, "Come here, Catherine." When she came in, he told her, with tears in his eyes from laughing so much, that his silly servant was in love. But my mother, instead of laughing, was very touched by this. "Who is it that you have fallen in love with, my poor man?" she asked. He answered without hesitation, "With Louise, Madame Baroness." My mother said very seriously, "We must try to handle this matter the best way we can." So Louise was called and questioned by my mother. She said that she knew Jean liked her, that Jean had talked to her about it many times, but that she didn't want him. She didn't say why. 2 months passed during which my father and mother kept asking this girl to marry Jean. Since she wasn't in love with any other man, she couldn't give a good reason for saying no. Finally, my father convinced her by giving her a large amount of money, and they got the two of them started on a farm, this very farm. I didn't see them for 3 years, and then I learned that Louise had died of a sickness. But my father and mother also passed away, and it was 2 more years before I saw Jean again. One autumn day, near the end of October, I decided to go hunting on this part of my land, which my father had told me was full of animals to hunt. So one evening, a wet evening, I arrived at this house. I was shocked to see my father's old servant with completely white hair, even though he was only about 45 or 46 years old. I asked him to eat dinner with me, at this very table where we are sitting now. It was raining hard. We could hear the rain hitting the roof, the walls, and the windows, pouring down into the farmyard like a flood, and my dog was howling in the shed where the other dogs are howling tonight. All of a sudden, when the maid had gone to bed, Jean said in a shy voice, "Sir Baron." "What is it, dear Jean?" "I have something to tell you." "Tell me, dear Jean. Do you remember Louise, my wife?" "Yes, I remember her." "Well, she left me a message for you." "What was it?" Well, it was what you might call a confession." "Oh? And what was it about?" It was, I'd rather not tell you, but I have to. Well, here it is, it wasn't the sickness that killed her. It was sadness, that's what it was. As soon as she moved here after we got married, she became thin, she changed so much that you wouldn't recognize her, Sir Baron. She became just like I was before we got married, but it was the opposite, just the opposite. I called the doctor. He said it was her liver, something serious. I don't know these big words, Sir Baron. I bought a lot of medicine, but she wouldn't take any of it. She said, "It won't help, Jean. It won't do any good." I could see she was hiding something, and one day I found her crying, but I didn't know what to do. I bought her nice things, like dresses and earrings, but nothing made her feel better. I knew she was going to die. One snowy night in November, she told me to call the priest. When he came, she said, "Jean, I have to tell you something. I have never betrayed you, never. But I can't stop thinking about the young Baron, Monsieur René. I cared for him too much. That's why I'm dying. If I could have seen him, I might have lived. Please promise me, Jean, that one day you will tell him. It will bring me peace." So, I promised her. After hearing this, my dear boy, I felt terrible. I had no idea I had caused her so much pain. I said, "Ah, my poor Jean." He replied, "Well, it's over now. There's nothing I could do." I took his hand, and we both started to cry. Jean then asked, "Will you come and see her grave?" I nodded, unable to speak. He lit a lantern, and we walked through the rain. He stopped at a marble grave and said, "Here it is." The stone read, "To Louise Hortense Marinette, wife of Jean-François Lebrement, farmer. She was a faithful wife. God rest her soul." We knelt in the wet grass, with the rain falling on the grave. I thought of her heart buried there. Poor heart. Since then, I come here every year. I feel guilty, as if I did something wrong, even though Jean seems to forgive me.